Hi, it's Katrina. What if I told you there is a new discovery that could change everything? Let's explore a wall in New Zealand that could have been built by an unknown civilization, volcanoes that might explode at any moment, and new technology that is bringing the face of a mummy back to life. New Zealand's unexplainable wall. New Zealand's Kaimanawa Wall is either a natural formation or an enormous wall left behind by a forgotten civilization. You can decide for yourself over the next couple of minutes. The wall is incredible to see with your own eyes, standing amidst the moss and ferns and foliage of the Kaimanawa State Forest near Lake Taupo. You can't see it very well from far away. You need to be right next to it to really appreciate its secrets. It's when you're standing there just feet from the structure that you realize it isn't a single rock. It's not a big boulder, but rather individual blocks stacked upon each other like a Lego wall. Only these are no Lego pieces. The carved stones are old, possibly 2,000 years old. If true, history needs to change immediately, because as far as historians and archaeologists are concerned, there wasn't a single human being in New Zealand until 800 years ago. If somebody built a wall many millennia in the past, it means there is an extinct civilization that nobody knows about. Let's take a look at the wall's discovery. Prior to the 1990s, locals in the area knew about it, but they thought it was a rock outcropping that suffered from years of erosion. It was never seen as anything special. As the area became more accessible with roads and trails bringing tourists by the boatload, visitors started asking a lot of questions. People noticed the blocks looked way too perfect to have been made by nature. By 1996, the scientific world was intrigued. Barry Brailsford from Christchurch, a self-proclaimed geologist, teamed up with David Hatcher Childress from the USA. David wasn't what you would call a mainstream scientist. He's an author of controversial literature about lost civilizations. Together, these two concluded the wall was made by a culture that predates the Polynesians. They also determined the wall to be related to other megalithic structures found throughout the Pacific. The idea was that a culture had spread across Polynesia in the days when the Roman Empire was just taking off. Not everyone was convinced. The Maori weren't even around 2,000 years ago. Other than the Kaimanawa Wall, there isn't a single piece of proof that ancient humans lived in New Zealand. The wall's mystery became such a problem that New Zealand had no choice but to hire geologist Philip Andrews to make an official scientific assessment. In his report, Andrews identified the rocks as being 330,000 years old. He said they were fractured by natural cooling processes that made them look more artificial than they really are. I want to know your take on this in the comments. Is the wall natural, or does it hint at a civilization lost to history? Antarctica is covered in volcanoes. You're going to be blown away by how many volcanoes there are in Antarctica. Underneath the frosty exterior of the world's coldest continent are dozens of volcanoes just waiting to blow their tops. A new study published in the journal Geological Society, perhaps you've heard of it, has shown that there are around 138 of them. But are these Antarctic bombs going to blow anytime soon? Scientists may have found them, but they can't tell whether or not they are active. Currently, there are only 2 known active volcanoes on the continent. One of them is Mount Erebus, the highest peak in Antarctica, standing 12,448 feet tall. It's the southernmost active volcano known to humans. And according to Connor Bacon from Columbia University, it's been erupting continuously since 1972. It even has a lava lake in a crater at its summit. Scientists are now rushing to figure out how dangerous these other volcanoes are. Who would have thought Antarctica could get so hot? Maya eclipse bloodletting ceremony. Eclipses have always made people a little nervous, especially ancient people. Long before modern cities expanded and light pollution blocked the night sky, ancient civilizations looked at an unimaginably beautiful palette of colors, stars, and blinking planets. The night sky was so vivid and real that to the ancients, it seemed like gods really could live in that cosmic chaos. For the Maya, the stars were everything. They looked up at the heavens and came up with scientific models to predict the cyclical movements of celestial bodies. They could anticipate a solar eclipse, which is when the moon entirely blocks the sun. Historians know the Maya were accomplished astrologers because they reported what they saw. The Dresden Codex is one of only 4 remaining Maya codices dating to the 11th century. Inside its old and worn pages is information on astronomical events. It also details the Maya's interpretation of those events. The Maya attached meaning to everything that happened in the sky. The sunset was associated with death. Each night, the Maya believed the sun god Kinich Ahau made the journey through the underworld, dying in the dark land of Xibalba, to be reborn the next day at sunrise. When there was a solar eclipse, the Maya viewed it as a broken sun. It was seen as foreshadowing for an imminent cataclysmic event, an incoming apocalypse of sorts. The sun turning black was bad news. The Maya believed, even though they could anticipate the eclipse, that Kinich Ahau's mortal enemy was making moves against the sun. This enemy was Chak-Ek, Kinich Ahau's brother and god of war. He was also seen as Venus, which on solar eclipses can be spotted shining brightly near the eclipsed sun. To the Maya, it looked like Venus was attacking the sun. Not to worry, the Maya had a solution to the problem. Their solution was to gather blood. This is a process known as bloodletting. It was gruesome, with the king stabbing himself to gather some blood droplets, which he would then offer to the sun god. Mayan kings thought by giving a small piece of their own life force as a sacrifice, they would heal the sun god. And hey, it always seemed to work, right? Idaho's secret submarine base. There is a secret submarine base in a place you would likely never expect. It's a bit of a mystery because this place doesn't even have access to the ocean. Idaho, which is landlocked, is home to one of the most important underwater outposts in the United States of America. Some have recently started to call it Idaho's Area 51. The town of Bayview stands at the edge of the biggest lake in Idaho. Underneath the surface, not far from town, is the U.S. Navy Acoustic Research Detachment. You can call it ARD for short. Even though you're currently learning about it in a YouTube video, ARD remains one of the Navy's best-kept secrets. Few people know this place exists. The lake is often filled with submarines, only they aren't the same size as the ones you find in the ocean. These subs are scaled down, typically no bigger than 88 feet long. They are used by scientists to explore the latest in underwater technology. Because the lake is so deep and quiet, it makes the perfect real-world laboratory. Since the 1960s, this semi-secret base has been involved in testing almost every new development in submarine technology, from buoyancy to accuracy. The lake also happens to be home to a monster known as the Paddler. Yes, a real legendary monster. People have spotted a creature that supposedly looks just like the Loch Ness Monster, and the sightings happen all the time. Only here's the thing. Loch Ness is only 755 feet deep. Lake Pend Oreille is over 1,000 feet deep. There is a much higher chance of a monster hiding in Idaho than in Scotland, although maybe not so much with all that high-tech gear at the secret base. Surely a submarine would have spotted the Paddler by now. And now for number 10, but first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Scott Noonan and New World MMA1 for supporting this channel. Thanks, guys! We wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about incredible recent discoveries. We've got a lot. Prehistoric dragon in Japan. A dragon fossil was discovered in Japan, the bony remains of a beast unlike anything alive today. Although, it wasn't a dragon in the way you might be thinking. Paleontologists said the monstrous predator was an aquatic dragon. It soared above the floor of the Pacific Ocean about 100 million years ago. According to scientists with the University of Cincinnati, the dragon is a completely new species. It was discovered by paleontologist Takuya Konishi in southwestern Japan. Takuya came across the fossils in 2006, but the discovery was only recently announced. It took years to carefully extract each fossilized bone from the surrounding sandstone. Then it took even more years to analyze the fossils before sitting down to describe the findings in a new study. If there ever was a dragon in the ocean, this creature was it. Scientists say it's a mosasaur, a family of prehistoric marine reptiles that were almost like the tyrannosaurs of the ocean, only they had heads like crocodiles, huge flippers that looked like wings, and a finned tail. If you were in the ocean and one of these monsters swam overhead, it would block out the sun, and you would probably be a snack. Takuya tried to explain the bizarreness of the creature by saying there is no modern analog for its morphology. Nothing in the ocean alive today looks like a mosasaur, which makes it tough for researchers to understand how it functions. They think it most likely had good vision and was a lethal hunter. Mosasaurs were known for growing more than 36 feet long and weighing 11 tons. This new species has a really crazy name that I can't even really pronounce. Its name means blue dragon, which is fitting for Japan. In most mythologies, dragons take to the skies, but in Japan, mythical dragons are aquatic. Maybe Japan based their dragons on sightings of extinct monsters like the blue dragon. The face of the Ice Maiden. A group of mountaineers climbed their way into a nightmare. They stumbled upon the frozen body of an ancient Inca maiden, a beautifully preserved princess who had been trapped in the Andes Mountains for centuries. The year was 1995. Johann Reinhard was on his way up a dormant volcano called Mount Ampato in Peru. The mountain is enormous, stretching 20,630 feet towards the clouds. When the mountaineer reached the summit, he discovered a patch of recently melted ice and some erosion from a volcanic eruption. In this patch of melted ice was a frozen body. The body belonged to a young girl, twisted and misshapen after 500 years. She'd been at the top of that mountain since the days of the Inca. Although the discovery is old, there have been some very exciting developments that I want to tell you about. The Ice Maiden was called Juanita. She was in such good condition that her internal organs, blood, skin, and hair were preserved. Scientists were able to look into Juanita's stomach and see the last meal she had. The maiden was discovered with a great many treasures that had tumbled down the mountainside. Researchers found statues, maize kernels, textiles, and other ceremonial objects. Scientists were able to easily determine that Juanita was a sacrificial victim from Cusco. She likely belonged to a noble family. Her selection as a sacrifice would have been interpreted by her family as a very high honor. 2 more ice mummies were discovered that same year, and another female mummy was found on the mountain in 1997. To this day, it's unclear exactly how many young girls the Inca left as offerings to their gods across the vast and snowy volcano. Here's a picture of Juanita. This is an accurate reconstruction of the Ice Maiden of Peru by Oscar Nilsson in 2023. It was a painstaking process that took over 400 hours. It started with CT scans of Juanita, along with tomography scans of her body and skull. All the information had to be compiled about her age, complexion, the clothes she was wearing, the proportions of her face, everything. It was 400 hours of work spread across almost 2 years. But it was worth it to be able to look into the eyes of a perfectly healthy girl who was about 15 when she was drugged, led to the peak of the volcano, and then killed by a sudden blow to the head. That turned out a little more gruesome than I had anticipated, but that's the truth of it. In 2018, Dr. Dagmara Socha from the University of Warsaw embarked on a mission to understand more about the Ice Maiden. He learned that Juanita and other victims like her chewed coca leaves and drank ayahuasca in the weeks leading up to their deaths. Nobody knows why, but they do have some good guesses. Scientists think the psychotropic and hallucinogenic drugs may have been to reduce their anxiety prior to the final blow to the head. If you had to climb 20,000 feet just to be bonked on the noggin, you wouldn't mind a shaman's concoction either. The ocean under our feet. Scientists have made a discovery deep beneath the surface of the planet that might call for a reevaluation of what humans know about Earth's water, which I guess isn't really that much, to be honest. a humongous reservoir of water 3 times bigger than all the oceans of the world combined has been found 434 miles beneath our very feet. That is a ton of water. Not literally, but figuratively. The shocking find was made by researchers at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. Scientists were on a quest to learn more about the origins of the planet's water when they stumbled onto this subterranean ocean. It's deep beneath the mantle, encased within a thick shell of ringwoodite, which is a bluish type of rock. But I'm not here to talk about rocks. I'm here to talk about water. Do you know the current prevailing theory for where water on the planet came from? It's believed that over millions of years, comet impacts brought frozen ice to the planet. Ice from the comets melted, slowly accumulating to form the oceans of the world. This could be completely wrong. The unimaginable size of this inner world ocean has led scientists from Northwestern to put forward a new theory. Stephen Jacobson, the lead scientist on the case, said the evidence now supports the notion that Earth already had water. Water originated internally, from within the planet, like an orange that you squeeze in your fist, leaking juice from the fissures between your fingers. Earth's water seeped out of the cracks from the inside to the outside. This was no easy thing to discover. Scientists deployed a network of 2,000 seismographs across the United States. The instruments then picked up the readings from more than 500 earthquakes. They measured waves traveling through the innermost depths of the planet, including the core. By measuring the waves as they passed through the Earth, scientists could tell whether the waves were moving through damp rock or solid rock. This was what led them to the discovery of all of that water. But the revelation is so new that I can't tell you much more about it right now. Scientists still have a lot of information to sift through. It could be another century before anyone learns why there is so much water locked within the planet. The illegal treasure hunt. In Utah, one man with some power tools dug a tunnel in an attempt to steal treasure. In the process, he caused incalculable damage to an ancient archaeological site. It's one of the weirdest stories of 2024. The Fort Pierce Historic Site is 12 miles from St. George, Utah. You can visit this place any time of the year, and I highly recommend it. It is one of only 3 surviving stone guard posts that were built during the Black Hawk War. It also happens to be near the Warner Valley Dinosaur Track Site. You can get your share of bloody history and then enjoy a few dinosaur footprints. The infamous Black Hawk War began in 1865 with the Ute tribe of Utah. The tribe was led by Chief Black Hawk, who banded together with other groups of Native Americans. The natives wanted the Mormons out of their traditional homelands. They went on raiding parties, attacking Mormon settlements alongside their allies, the Navajo. They stole livestock, killed settlers, and caused general mayhem. You would too if it was your land, but it didn't go so well for them. An estimated 70 Mormons were killed during the raids and 100 Native Americans. To protect their herds and themselves, the Mormons built forts along major trails. Each fort had a small group of armed men with horses to attack any raiding parties. When they saw a party of Native Americans coming, a rider was sent to the nearest settlement to warn them. Fort Pierce was manned off and on until 1873, when it was abandoned entirely. The area isn't just the fort. There are also 500-year-old petroglyphs and other signs of habitation dating back to 1000 BC. Now that you know the importance of this national site, it's time for me to introduce you to Eduardo Humberto Seoane. He has been charged with a felony for illegal digging. Eduardo destroyed significant portions of the historical site by digging a hole about 2 feet wide and 15 feet deep. It's amazing Eduardo managed to get as far as he did before he got caught. Daryl Cashin with the Washington County Sheriff's Search and Rescue said he couldn't believe what he was seeing. By the time the police arrived, the suspect had been excavating for quite some time. Eduardo told the cops that he was trying to prospect for silver, but that's not the case. He was digging up archaeological evidence in an attempt to find valuable loot. Archaeologist Joel Baumgarten said Eduardo was digging directly through a prehistoric trash dump filled with relics. Much of the stuff that he destroyed is irreplaceable. Eduardo now has a lot to answer for. creepy manuscript made of skin. In 2014, a book was donated to the Rare Publications Museum, which is part of the National Academic Library in Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan. You're not going to believe what it's made out of. It was made with human flesh. The mysterious manuscript is written in Old Latin. It's 330 pages long, and it was bound with human skin. Researcher Moldir Tolitbey from the library in Astana said the book was bound using an obsolete bookbinding method called anthropodermic bookbinding. This is a real thing that used to be popular. If you want to get all the gruesome details and creepy intricacies of the practice, you can fall down a deep black hole Googling it. What I'll tell you now is that as of 2022, there were 50 books in public institutions across the world alleged to have been made through anthropodermic bookbinding. The book in Astana was written in 1532 in northern Italy by a notary named Petrus Puardus. Only 10 of its 330 pages have been deciphered. You might be thinking the book contains spells and instructions for bloody rituals, but the contents likely aren't that strange. The initial translations suggest the whole book is filled with financial transactions, things like credit records and mortgages. Although maybe that's even scarier than blood rituals. The disturbing book isn't the only creepy novel in Astana. On your next trip to Kazakhstan, be sure to stop by the National Academic Library to check out their almost 13,000 rare publications. They have books made from snakeskin, gems, silks, and even pure golden thread. Pretty cool, huh? The Ancient Pickled Fetus. Continuing with the theme of creepy, let me turn your attention to ancient Egypt, where researchers discovered an Egyptian mummy with a pickled fetus still in her belly. Researchers were shocked when they did CT scans of the mummy and found she wasn't a man like originally thought, and also that a developing infant had slowly pickled in her womb through the mummification process, as the woman's uterus became acidic. If you haven't left yet, you must be made of seriously strong stuff. Ancient Egyptian mummies are cool when their bandages are on, but underneath, things can get pretty gnarly. In 2021, a group of scientists from the Warsaw Mummy Project in Poland released their study of the mysterious lady. She lived in the 1st century BC and died in her 20s. Her coffin bore the name of a male priest, or Jehuti, so everyone had assumed the X-ray scans would reveal a male body, but that didn't turn out to be the case. The best guess researchers have is that somebody reused the coffin. Perhaps somebody threw away the original man's body, using his old sarcophagus to bury the mysterious female. Then, years later, she was robbed by tomb raiders, who stole whatever jewels she was buried with, and she ultimately ended up with a bunch of Polish scientists. As for the pregnancy aspect, that's the biggest mystery. She was between 26 and 30 weeks at her time of death. She's also the only pregnant mummy that has ever been found. It's such a rare occurrence that the Polish study has been controversial. Sahar Salim, a mummy expert at Cairo University, said he is still skeptical that the fetus was legitimate. Why did the Egyptians mummify this pregnant woman and no others? Did it have a religious significance? Or maybe she didn't know she was pregnant. Salim suggested the Polish team never even found a fetus. But the Polish scientists said that they discovered a lump of mineralized tissue left behind from the acidity inside the woman's uterus that slowly dissolved the bones. Salim argued the mineralized lump might be nothing more than the leftover material from embalming packs. The folding moon. About 4.2 billion years ago, that's billion with a B, the moon flipped itself inside out. This created the lunar surface that each of us sees in the night sky. But how the moon pulled off such a weird transformation has always been a big mystery to scientists, at least up until now. Did you know the moon is 4.5 billion years old? Did you also know that it's essentially a mini Earth? The moon formed when something smashed into the planet, causing a huge glob of molten material to dislodge itself. That material coalesced into a solid orb, which became the moon. To understand what precisely happened, researchers looked at rock samples that were collected during the Apollo mission to the moon. They identified basaltic lava rocks containing high concentrations of titanium. The presence of titanium had scientists scratching their heads. A team from the University of Arizona then suggested that maybe the moon formed very rapidly to be completely covered in a hot magma ocean. If you had looked up at the moon 4.5 billion years ago, you would have seen a floating orb of lava. How unnerving would that be to have a glowing red moon? Then, as the hot magma ocean cooled, it hardened to form the outer layer of the moon, the mantle, and the crust. But this wasn't the end. The solid layers were made of heavy and dense minerals like titanium, while on the inside of the moon, there was still hot magma. This created a gravitational instability. The mantle and crust were likely forced inside the moon, sinking into the interior and flipping the moon inside out. Researchers have speculated over this for years, but now, with data from the Apollo samples, combined with new information from NASA's Gravity Recovery and Interior Laboratory, scientists think they've proved it. The last step is to collect more samples from the moon. That should be in 2025. Mark your calendar because NASA's Artemis 3 mission promises to return humans to the moon for the first time in more than 50 years. Talking to Neanderthals. Neanderthals could talk. Our closest ancestors possessed the ability to produce the same speech as humans. They could also perceive speech, meaning they could likely sing and dance as well. The scientists who have just figured this out have made a huge breakthrough in understanding the evolution of language. The study was done by anthropologist Professor Rolf Quam and his team at Binghamton University. Rolf said the results clearly show that Neanderthals talked like people. But how did he reach that conclusion? Researchers started by creating virtual 3D models of ear structures in Homo sapiens. Then, using fossils as a template, they created similar 3D models for Neanderthals. They put the models into an auditory bioengineering model. The software then estimated the hearing abilities of Neanderthals. Sure enough, their ears could hear in most of the same frequencies as modern human speech sounds. But did they talk to us? Did our ancestors communicate with Neanderthals? Scientists know they bred together and had babies. Presumably, they had talked about something on their firelit dates down at the watering hole or wherever Stone Age people had dates. They didn't just sit in silence. Researchers always assumed there was communication between Neanderthals and humans, but now they have proof of it. Maybe one day experts will recreate what Neanderthal speech sounded like. If they could hear, presumably they could talk as well. Looted war relics. A family in Massachusetts discovered 22 artifacts in their attic. These aren't normal artifacts. They aren't a couple of forgotten pieces of china in an old cardboard box. The family had to call the FBI because of where these things came from. The artifacts are Japanese, looted after the Battle of Okinawa in World War II. They had been stashed in the attic by a veteran of the war. In January 2023, the family reached out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. At first, the family didn't quite understand what they were dealing with. FBI art crime team member Special Agent Geoffrey J. Kelly said the family thought they came across valuable Asian art. They found 6 painted scrolls from the 18th and 19th centuries, and they also found a 19th century hand-drawn map of Okinawa, along with some pieces of pottery and a few ceramics. The bombshell came when they found the letter. A typewritten letter said the objects were looted in the final days of the war. When the family looked online to see if they could identify the objects, they were surprised to find them on the FBI's National Stolen Art File. In 2001, Japan registered the artifacts as missing. If you find stolen relics from a war in your attic, you can't just go and sell them. Many of the looted treasure is documented and flagged to prevent the sale of war treasure. The next few months were intense. The FBI teamed up with the Smithsonian Institution, and the artifacts were transported from Massachusetts to Washington, D.C. There, the scrolls were unrolled to reveal epic portraits of Okinawan royalty. Then came the handover. The artifacts were returned to Japan on Friday, March 15th. After almost 80 years missing, the objects were home. But listen to this. The FBI art crime team has already recovered stolen treasure at a value of over $900 million since 2004. Keeping out barbarians. In Germany, archaeologists discovered the ruins of a Roman fortress. There are lots of these fortresses spread across Europe. The Romans certainly built a lot of them as they expanded their borders. But this one is unique. Historians believe it was used to keep out the barbarians. For years, local archaeologists suspected there to be an ancient defensive structure underneath a cobblestone street in the German city of Aachen. But you can't just go digging up city streets on a whim. Only recently, thanks to a construction project, archaeologists have an opportunity to poke around in the ground. And there it was, a fortification from 1,700 years ago. Archaeologist Donata Kirit said the construction of the wall left no doubt that it was of Roman origin. Even though the wall was buried underneath a modern road, it was still amazingly intact. The specialized concrete used by the Romans still held the blocks together. This thing was sturdier than most walls built today. The archaeologists only found a couple of ruins. They couldn't excavate a vast area to uncover the whole fortress. Still, they learned a lot in their investigation. The wall dates from the 3rd century. It was likely part of a large circular barricade, punctuated by gates and with towers rising above. The fortification was to protect the Romans from Germanic tribes. The last thing Romans wanted were barbarians mucking about in their territory. The most important part is that it worked. The German city of Aachen was built atop a much older Roman stronghold known as a castrum. Germanic tribes were raiding relentlessly in the late 200s, but after the walls went up, the barbarians couldn't get inside to raid anymore. So I guess the walls really do work sometimes. Thanks for watching! Which of these discoveries did you like hearing about the most? Let me know in the comments below. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and stick around for an older video you might have missed.
Recent King Tut discoveries. Perhaps the most famous ancient Egyptian burial ever discovered is that of King Tutankhamun, better known as King Tut. British archaeologist Howard Carter found the tomb in Egypt's Valley of the Kings in 1922. It was the first pharaoh's tomb that hadn't been looted at some point throughout history. King Tut was only 18 years old when he died abruptly for reasons that remain unclear to this day. He remained an obscure, little-known figure in history until Carter discovered his tomb and the king rose to fame. It took years for archaeologists to clear thousands of artifacts from the boy king's tomb. The most magnificent discovery is the sarcophagus the king was found in. It was made from pure gold and kept his remains safe for 3,000 years. But there were other objects found inside the burial that offered some insight into the young ruler's short life. For example, 2 mummified fetuses were laid to rest nearby. It wasn't until 2008 that experts were able to determine that the babies were actually King Tut's daughters, and that they were likely mothered by his half-sister and great royal wife, Ankhesenamun. As scholars continue to study the ancient ruler, they are able to give the public a more accurate depiction of him. The Milwaukee Public Museum currently has a display of King Tut and his chariot that Education Programs Coordinator Richard Hederman described as a more cutting-edge level of Tut scholarship. He went on to explain that the chariot's 2 horses were modeled after what was found in the tomb and based on popular styles of the time. Experts even relied on CT scans of Tut's face to create a realistic forensic reconstruction. A missing 8th continent. Millions of years ago, the Earth was a very different place. Sometime between 87 and 79 million years ago, a large piece of the Earth's crust broke free from the supercontinent of Gondwana. It began to sink into the ocean, and 23 million years after it started its descent, it was completely submerged. Scientists officially discovered the 2 million square mile sunken landmass known as Zealandia during the 1990s, and spent several years going back and forth on what to classify it as. Then, finally, in 2017, a study announced that Zealandia met all the qualifications for being classified as a submerged continent, rather than a continental fragment. It's roughly 1 billion years old, making it the world's youngest continent. It's also the smallest and thinnest, and contains just a handful of islands sticking out of the water. The remaining 94% of Zealandia sits beneath the waves, where it went unnoticed for centuries as explorers searched the globe for new continents. It hasn't been studied much, for the obvious reason that it is thousands of feet below the water's surface, but scientists are working to learn more about it now that they know that it's there. Ancient Martian volcano. Less than a year after landing on Mars, NASA's Perseverance rover has made at least one surprising discovery. Recent findings indicate that lava once flowed at the site of an ancient lake on the red planet known as the Jezero crater. Scientists had previously wondered if the bedrock the rover drives on was made of sedimentary rock, if the material was deposited by an ancient river, or if it was igneous rock, which is made from cooled volcanic material. They were close to giving up on ever finding out the answer when the Perseverance used its array of sophisticated instruments to examine the rock's composition and mineral content. The analysis revealed the presence of olivine and pyroxene crystals, which are both indicators that the rock came from volcanic lava flows. It was formed from thick, cooling magma and was then altered several times by water when the planet still had an abundance of liquid. Scientists are studying the samples to learn more about the past presence of water on the red planet. They are also trying to figure out if the rocks were formed in a cooling lake of lava or some other way, perhaps in an underground chamber that was eventually exposed by erosion. The glass octopus. The seldom seen glass octopus is almost completely transparent. Its eyes, optic nerve, and digestive tract are the only opaque parts of its body. The species was first discovered in 1918, but it's only been seen a handful of times since then. And until recently, the only way for scientists to study the glass octopus was by examining the gut contents of its predators. Consequently, they know very little about these elusive creatures, which live between 200 and 3,000 meters below the surface in tropical and subtropical waters. Researchers finally got the chance to see a glass octopus in its natural habitat over the summer during a 34-day expedition off the remote Phoenix Islands, more than 3,200 miles northeast of Sydney. In addition to spotting the rare deep dweller, the team discovered what they believe are several previously unknown aquatic species. They also mapped over 11,500 miles of the sea floor around the Phoenix Islands and captured video of the marine life to be found there, including the world's largest living fish, known as the whale shark. The exploration was part of an ongoing effort among experts to learn more about what lies within the planet's vastly understudied oceans. Scientists say that looking out for our own well-being starts with keeping these ecosystems healthy. What other kinds of creatures do you think lurk deep below the ocean surface? Let me know in the comments below. Earliest origins of mammal teeth. 300 million years ago, a primitive reptile called Shashajaya bermani modified its teeth in response to environmental instability, laying the foundations for what eventually became the incisor, the canine, and molar, teeth that all modern mammals have. Yes, you heard that right. We got our teeth from an ancient and distantly related reptile. Dr. Suresh Singh, who participated in a recent study on the creature, explained that there is a clear difference in shape between teeth in different parts of the animal's mouth. He described the Sajajaya's chompers as the precursors to what you see among today's mammals, and that this is the oldest known record of these types of teeth in the evolutionary tree. The creature existed during the late Carboniferous period, when giant insects roamed the earth and the planet was covered in swampy rainforests. When climate change saw these wetlands replaced with more arid and seasonal habitats, the diversity and availability of prey changed. It appears as though the teeth transformed in response to these changes, enabling it to hunt both semi-aquatic and land animals. The species became a top predator thanks to its teeth. Shashajaya was a member of a group of mammal-like reptiles called therapsids, which eventually evolved into the earliest mammals. The fossil that was examined in the study was found in a part of Utah known as the Valley of the Gods, where numerous other prehistoric creatures have been unearthed. Roman-era ring. While exploring a pair of shipwrecks off the Israeli coast near the ancient port city of Caesarea, archaeologists discovered something truly amazing. They found a Roman-era gold ring bearing an image of a shepherd boy carrying a sheep on his shoulders. Set against a green stone, Early Christians used images like this to represent Jesus. The team found other treasures as well, including bronze and silver coin hoards dating back to the 3rd century, and an early 14th century coin hoard. They also uncovered a ring bearing a red gemstone, Roman-era figurines, and bronze bells that were used to ward off evil spirits. The ship's hulls sit just 13 feet underwater in the Mediterranean. They were most likely wrecked during a storm while anchored nearby, according to Israel Antiquities Authority spokesperson Jacob Sharvit. He further explained in a BBC interview that Caesarea was home to one of the first Christian communities. It's where the Apostle Peter's baptism of the Roman centurion Cornelius marked the first instance of the acceptance of a non-Jew. From there, he said, Christianity went on to spread throughout the world. Oldest domestic dog in the Americas. The evolution of modern domestic dogs is a rather confusing topic. In fact, researchers are still trying to figure out when, where, and from whom they evolved, as well as how they first reached certain parts of the world, including North America. They added a piece to the puzzle in early 2021, when a study led by the University of Buffalo identified the oldest confirmed remains of a domestic dog in the Americas. The evidence came in the form of a femur fragment belonging to a canine that lived and died in southeast Alaska around 10,150 years ago. A DNA analysis revealed that the dog descended from a lineage that diverged from Siberian dogs as far back as 16,700 years ago. At the time, humans may have been migrating to the continent along a coastal route that encompassed the region the dog's remains were found in. In a statement, study leader and evolutionary biologist Charlotte Lindquist explained that dogs are a proxy for human occupation, meaning that their presence is an indicator that people were in an area at a given time. She pointed out that the findings fall in line with the theory that humans migrated to the Americas toward the end of the last ice age as coastal glaciers retreated, and they apparently brought their canine companions with them. It represented the first of several waves of dog migrations into the Americas, answering the question of when dogs first arrived on the continents until or unless older evidence is found. We've been with dogs for a very long time. Largest millipede ever. England had a much more tropical climate 326 million years ago. Back then it was home to an 8-foot-long millipede that weighed as much as 110 pounds and had between 32 and 64 legs. Scary, right? To reach such a large size, it likely ate a high-nutrient diet consisting of nuts and seeds, and even small amphibians and other creatures. It was the largest millipede ever known to exist, so it probably ate whatever fit into its mouth. The fossilized creature, known as an Arthropleura, was discovered on a beach in Northumberland, England in 2018. It's the third Arthropleura ever found, with the previous 2 specimens having been discovered in Germany, and it's much older and bigger than both. The gargantuan millipede's fossil was found in a chunk of sandstone that fell onto the beach. Scientists think that this site was part of an old river channel, and that the fossil may not encompass the millipede itself, but an exoskeleton that the creature shed when it was growing even bigger. Fossils like this are rare, according to Dr. Neil Davies, who told the BBC that because experts haven't found a fossilized Arthropleura head, their knowledge of the creature remains limited. The recently discovered specimen is slated to soon go on display in Cambridge. Mass migration changes DNA. During the Middle to the Late Bronze Age, a massive wave of migrants swept through mainland Europe and into Britain. Nobody knows what caused this large-scale movement, but a new study has revealed that it caused noticeable changes in the genetic makeup of the population. Researchers analyzed the DNA of 793 ancient skeletons found in Great Britain. They noticed that a gene enabling people to digest raw milk increased rapidly in the region during the early Iron Age, preceding the change elsewhere throughout Northern Europe by about 1,000 years. The genetic effects of the mass migration were present as early as 1400 BC in Kent. These changes remained confined to the area until around 1000 BC, when the ancestry all throughout England and Wales changed. Roughly half of the DNA in Iron Age Britain came from the newly arrived migrants, according to lead researcher David Reich, who spoke with the BBC. So, where did these people come from? So far, the closest matches researchers have found are to ancient populations in France, but they haven't yet confirmed the findings. The people who were in Britain before the migrants arrived descended mainly from the Beaker people, a culture that had come to the region at the end of the Neolithic era around the same time Stonehenge was built. In addition to bringing new DNA to the region, the Bronze Age wave of arrivals brought their own culture and customs, including Celtic languages. It's unknown whether they were the first Celtic-speaking group in Britain, or if they simply used their own versions of it. The effects the newcomers had on the existing population are unclear as far as the language goes, but their presence certainly impacted the genetics and lifestyle of the people who were already there, especially through the dietary changes that came along with being lactose tolerant. Oldest ever family tree. Scientists have just put together one of the oldest ever family trees based on the nearly 6,000-year-old Hazelton North tomb in Cotswold Hills, England. Unearthed during the 1980s, the burial consisted of the remains of 35 people. They were excavated as part of an effort to preserve what was left of the grave after hundreds of years of farming on the land had destroyed most of it. In recent years, another team of scientists managed to extract DNA from the remains. They uncovered a complex web of relationships between the tomb's occupants, which appeared to include a 5-generation lineage that started with a man and his 4 wives. Altogether, the team managed to narrow down the relationships between 27 of the burial's 35 occupants. Interestingly, the family included 4 so-called stepsons, who bore their mother's lineage but were not descended from any of the men in the tomb. 2 young girls were buried in the grave, but there were no adult daughters, who researchers think may have been laid to rest in their spouses' tombs. There were 5 unrelated men found in the burial who were probably connected to the family in some way, but weren't genetically related. The exact nature of these relationships is still a mystery, but they were all buried together, so they must have been pretty close. Most Neolithic tombs found in Europe don't display this level of complexity. The family buried at Hazelton North was most likely polygamous and reflects a patrilineal way of life from the society's earlier days, when they arrived to the area as immigrants.
Mysterious shipwreck. In October, a mysterious wooden shipwreck appeared along the Baltic Sea coast in Latvia. A group of locals noticed the planks poking up through the sand and expected to find some small boards. Much to their surprise, it was an entire ship. Measuring roughly 40 feet long, the vessel is made of oak timber planks and copper nails, which were common features of 19th century Royal British Navy ships. At some point in time, the ship was likely covered in copper plates, which would have protected the wood from mollusks, shipworms, and saltwater corrosion. Equipped for long-distance travel, it was likely a warship or a merchant vessel. The ship was sturdy enough to withstand the often turbulent Baltic and North Seas, and it may have ventured as far as the tropics, according to a spokesperson for Latvia's National Cultural Heritage Board. The British Royal Navy rapidly expanded its fleet starting in the late 18th century, with each new ship requiring around 4,000 mature English oak trees. A lot of forests were cut down, especially since wood isn't the most durable material, as the archaeologists who dug up the ship would know. The moment it made contact with the air, it began to deteriorate. It will be time-consuming and expensive to preserve, but the government is thankfully stepping in to help. Bizarre dinosaur. Between 72 and 75 million years ago, an armored dinosaur with a bizarre weaponized tail roamed the Patagonia region of what is now southern Chile. Measuring roughly 6.5 feet long, this Cretaceous creature, dubbed Stegosaurus elengasen, was a type of herbivorous dinosaur called an ankylosaur. It somewhat resembled a stegosaurus, minus its tail, which scientists have likened to an extremely flat sword or an Aztec club called a macuitl. The deadly appendage is unlike any other tail ever seen on a dinosaur. It's short for a dinosaur tail, but functioned as a rather effective weapon against its enemies. The newly described specimen died near a river, where it may have been sucked into the ground by quicksand. A. elengasen's fossils show that ankylosaurs evolved much differently in different parts of the world after the supercontinent Pangaea broke up around 200 million years ago. The event split Pangaea into 2 separate landmasses, the southerly supercontinent Gondwana and Laurasia, which sat largely in the northern hemisphere. Very few ankylosaurs have been found in the region that once encompassed southern Gondwana, and the ones that have were much different than their neighbors to the north. They were smaller, with thinner legs and lighter armor, according to lead study author Sergio Soto Acuña, who told reporters about the discovery. What do you think about this dinosaur? Which dinosaur is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Human ancestors who walked on 2 feet. Australopithecus sediba was an early relative of modern humans that lived in Africa around 2 million years ago. The first fossils of the species were found in 2008 at the Malapa site outside Johannesburg, South Africa, in a region known as the Cradle of Civilization. They were unfortunately too badly decomposed for scientists to tell if A. sediba walked on 2 feet. More fossils belonging to a female nicknamed Isa were discovered at the same site in 2015. These newer examples consist of one of the most complete lower spines from that early on in the hominid record. In a recent study, researchers determined that A. sediba had a spinal curvature similar to that of a human female, and that the species would have been able to stand and walk comfortably on 2 legs. But they weren't too much like modern humans. The evidence also showed that A. sediba spent a lot of time climbing trees. By studying how our ancestors developed, scientists are not only learning more about the history of human evolution, the findings could potentially help them gain insight into modern-day health issues, like how and why our lower back is prone to injury. It's pretty incredible considering how archaeology and paleontology can provide information that benefits our health today. Bronze Age facial reconstruction. Sometime during the Bronze Age, a powerful woman died in what is now southeastern Spain. She was between 25 and 30 years old when she took her last breath and was laid to rest in a burial urn with a silver diadem or a crown atop her head. An array of lavish goods were deposited into the grave, including bracelets, hair pieces, earrings, silver rings, beaded necklaces, a drinking pot, and more. Archaeologists unearthed a ceramic vessel containing the woman's remains in 2014 in an area known as La Almoloya. In it, they also found the skeleton of a man who appeared to have died just a few years before her. The duo hailed from the Bronze Age El Argar culture, which lasted from around 2200 BC to 1500 BC. Researchers don't know who either of them were or how the two were connected, but it's apparent based on the woman's luxurious grave goods that she was a higher-ranking member of their society than the man was. In fact, her community gave her an elite burial even though she had outlived her male partner, suggesting that perhaps the woman's power had nothing to do with the man. Maybe he was her lover. A thorough examination of her skeleton showed that she died with several health conditions, including a missing rib and neck vertebra. Experts recently reconstructed her face, adding a human element to the discovery and making us feel just a little more connected to the past. Illegal colonial currency. While sifting through hundreds of old coins at their estate in Northumberland, England, a member of the Wentworth family found a silver coin that was minted in Boston, Massachusetts in 1652. It was probably brought back to Britain by one of the family's ancestors, who settled in New England during the colonial era. A descendant of the settlers named Wentworth Beaumont took the tin full of coins to James Morton, an expert from the London-based Morton and Eden auction house. He noticed the colonial shilling right away, later recalling in a statement that he could hardly believe his eyes. One side of the coin features the letters NE for New England, and the other bears the Roman numeral 12 to reflect its monetary value. Only an estimated 40 of these shillings survive today, and the recently discovered coin is the only one to ever be certified as being in mint condition. It was actually illegal to mint coins in the New World. Settlers were required to trade using wampum and currency from other countries, but they found themselves facing a coin shortage, and the Massachusetts General Court commissioned silversmith John Hull to strike the shillings. The first version of the coin, which is what the Beaumont family found in their attic, was simple and easy to counterfeit, so silversmiths improved the design over time. For the next 30 years, they stamped all the coins they made with the year 1652, so that the British wouldn't suspect that there was still any minting going on. But the authorities found out anyway, and in 1682, King Charles II shut the mint down for being treasonous. The Beaumont family shilling was recently sold at auction to an anonymous buyer for $351,912. Quite a bit more valuable than the illegal shilling was ever intended to be. A ferocious prehistoric marine reptile. Back in the 1970s, paleontologists in Boyacá, Colombia, unearthed the partial skull of a prehistoric marine animal resembling a swordfish. The creature was classified as a type of large, extinct aquatic reptile called an ichthyosaur. And while scientists got this part of its taxonomy correct, they accidentally labeled it under the wrong species. In fact, it wasn't until recently that a researcher finally noticed that the fossils represent a new animal. Measuring roughly 3 feet long, the creature's skull is packed with a pair of elongated jaws filled with terrifying gnarly teeth. Dubbed Kaitaisuka Sakikarum, it swam in the world's oceans between 115 and 130 million years ago, following the mass extinction that marked the end of the Jurassic period, and it reached anywhere from about 4 to 5 meters long. At the time, Colombia was an ancient biodiversity hotspot, according to researcher Durley Cortés, who spoke with reporters about the discovery. Unlike other ichthyosaurs, which had small, even-sized teeth, the newly identified specimen had teeth that were adapted to catching large prey. These terrifying chompers opened to somewhere between 70 and 75 degrees and were equipped to catch, crush, puncture, and saw through other marine reptiles and big fish. Discoveries like this are imperative for piecing together our murky understanding of how marine ecosystems evolved. Can you imagine coming across a terrifying creature like this while underwater today? Yikes! Mysterious mummy. Around 800 years ago, a young adult died in Peru and was mummified before being buried near the coast. The body's preparers wrapped the corpse in cloth, put the person's hands over their face, and tied their limbs and body up with a rope. These rituals were customary among the Andean cultures who lived in the region before the Incas rose to power around 1400 AD. Archaeologists discovered the mummy right outside the capital of Lima earlier this year. The area, known as Cajamarquilla, was once home to one of the biggest and busiest pre-Hispanic settlements along the Peruvian coast. The team believes that the individual was a young man who died between the ages of 25 and 30, but they have yet to confirm this. He was found in an oval-shaped tomb beneath the city square, suggesting that he was an important person, perhaps a trader who had moved to the town from elsewhere to sell his goods. The mummy's tomb was filled with ceramics, stone tools, and other grave goods. There were also signs that people visited his burial long after he died and left offerings of meat and vegetables. The team is currently awaiting radiocarbon dating and other test results so they can get a more precise idea on when the person died and perhaps who he was to his community. Oldest Denisovan fossils. It seems crazy to think about, but at one point in time, several different species of humans walked the Earth. Scientists know relatively little about these different groups of archaic humans, but are learning more as they continue to investigate. For example, in 2010, a DNA test revealed the existence of an extinct hominid group called the Denisovans, who, aside from the Neanderthals, are our closest known relatives. The test results indicated that the Denisovans had a Neanderthal-like build and dark features, and much like our extinct cousins, the Neanderthals, they interbred with humans, with some people still carrying Denisovan DNA in their blood right now. But for the most part, these ancient relatives of ours are largely a mystery to experts. Fossilized evidence of the Denisovans has only ever been found in Siberia and China, but genetic testing indicates that there were several distinct groups of them, and that they may have once been widespread across Asia and Oceania. Scientists recently announced the discovery of the oldest Denisovan fossils ever found to date. Like most of the others, they were unearthed inside Denisova Cave in Siberia. Based on the age of the soil they were found in, the bones are around 200,000 years old. They were found among an array of other artifacts that have never been mixed with Denisovan remains until now, including animal bones and stone objects that may have been used as tools. The team plans to study these items more closely to determine any connection they may have had with the Denisovans. So far, it appears as though the ancient hominids ate well during that time period, which was marked by a warm climate, making the area near the cave ideal for human habitation. They may have also competed with wild dogs and wolves for food and shelter. Could you imagine living back then? That'd be really scary. Aztec altar. While excavating at the ancient Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan near modern-day Mexico City, archaeologists found a 16th century altar and a pot full of cremated human remains. By the 16th century, the Spanish had conquered the city. The team that discovered the altar believe it dates back no further than the defeat of the city's Aztec ruler by Hernán Cortés in 1521. Known as the Battle of Tenochtitlan, this skirmish is commonly thought of as the beginning of the Aztec Empire's end. The altar sat inside the courtyard of a family's home. It is here where the family would have held a goodbye ritual of sorts before their culture was destroyed and their lives as they knew them were about to change dramatically. The altar was buried 13 feet below ground, according to archaeologist Mara Becerra, who believes that the family probably concealed it on purpose to keep it away from the conquistadors' view. Becerra theorized that the family was from the indigenous Mexica culture that eventually formed the Aztec Empire. Rare Roman mosaic. Jim Irvine was walking around on his father's property in Rutland, England last year during the COVID lockdown when he noticed some unusual pottery. He and his family helped archaeologists excavate the site, where they uncovered a huge Roman mural depicting scenes from Homer's Iliad. Measuring 36 by 23 feet, it's the first mural of its kind ever found in Britain. Anyone else find anything good during lockdown? Let me know in the comments below. Experts believe that the mural belonged to a wealthy homeowner who used it as the floor of his dining room or an entertaining area. Dating back to the 3rd or 4th century, it features images from Achilles' defeat of Hector at the end of the Trojan War. There are 3 scenes. The first depicts the pair fighting, the second shows Achilles dragging Hector's corpse, and in the third, the Trojans are preparing to get Hector's body back by paying his weight in gold. After digging up the mosaic, the team reburied it with plans to retrieve it when they're ready. It's been damaged over the last 1,700 years by fire and building projects, and the archaeologists don't want to risk causing any more harm to it while they figure out their next step. The villa's owner was not only wealthy, he was also well-read, according to project manager John Thomas. He would have been familiar with the classics when he commissioned the mosaic. In addition to the villa, the team found evidence of other ancient structures nearby. They believe that the home was abandoned, then used as a burial site. Thanks for watching! If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and don't forget to subscribe. Look forward to sharing more incredible discoveries with you. See you soon! Bye!